Week 10 of the fantasy football season. Here's a few receivers I looked at off the wire this week. The first receiver, Quinton Johnston, a Los Angeles Chargers Nines ball game, and he had a big one. 4 catches, 118 yards, a touchdown, a carry, 2 yards on 5 targets. So Johnson, we've seen some big games from him on and off the season. I know the week 7, week 8, he missed those games with injury, but he's back. And Justin Herbert, he's starting to click on all cylinders. McCloud, McConkey, Quinton Johnston playing good football now. He's available in tons of fantasy leagues at 85%. It's Quinton Johnston. And obviously, he's been a starter in the games he's played this season. So this season, 3 games out of the 6 he's played, he's had double-digit fantasy points. So week 10, not a great matchup versus Tennessee, where, believe it or not, their defense, for the most part, except those 2 hiccups in week 7 and week 8, versus obviously great teams in Buffalo and Detroit, has played well for the most part this season. But Quinton Johnston, after coming off a big performance like that, like I said, a top 2 target in this offense, definitely a wide receiver to add this week. The next wide receiver, Jerry Jeudy of the Cleveland Browns. Jerry Jeudy's been pretty steady for this Brown team this season, even though it's been a lost year for them, obviously. In the last 2 weeks, with Winston in the lineup, he's had double-digit fantasy points. Week 8 versus Baltimore, 5 catches, 79 yards. And week 9 versus the Chargers, 7 catches, 73 yards on 11 targets. I know they go on bye week here. Is a Cleveland Brown team, but he's available right now in 52% of fantasy leagues is Jerry Jeudy. He's getting a lot of targets. He's getting good looks. And we know Jameis Winston, gunslinger, good or bad thing, obviously. It could go both ways. We saw him throw a bunch of interceptions in that ball game versus the Chargers. But like I said, Jerry Jeudy, he's looking like the number 1 option on this offense. Him and Cedric Tillman, it's between. And he's definitely a wide receiver to add this week, even with going on the bye week. Next receiver, Xavier Legette of the Carolina Panthers. Xavier Legette, he's the number 1 option, arguably, in this offense in the passing game for this Carolina Panther team. So Legette, the last 2 weeks in a row, double-digit fantasy points ever since Deontay Johnson was hurt in week 8, and then he got traded before week 9. Week 8 at Denver, 4 catches, 34 yards, a touchdown, 7 targets. And week 9 versus Saints, 4 catches, 33 yards, a touchdown. So I know his yards haven't been great, is Xavier Legette, but he's got the nose for the end zone this season for this Carolina Panther team. And he was a first-round pick for a reason for this Carolina Panther team. He's got the nose for the end zone. He's now the number 1 wide receiver in another lost season for Carolina, even though they pulled off a great victory in that ball game. But they're 2-7 on the year and obviously going nowhere. So a decent matchup coming up here in Week 10 versus the New York Giants, where their secondary can't stop anyone. And Legette right now available in 72% of fantasy leagues. Next receiver, Jalen Tolbert of the Dallas Cowboys. Jalen Tolbert, the number 2 wideout. I know Brandon Cooks possibly could return for this Cowboy team, but we saw CeeDee Lamb. He got banged up in that ball game with the shoulder, and we don't know if he's going to be 100%. And Dak Prescott went down and left the game in the third quarter with a hamstring injury. So Cowboys are banged up. Cooper Rush, he's going to most likely start if Dak Prescott's going to be out for this Cowboy team. And Cooper Rush and Jalen Tolbert have tons of rapport working with the second team over the last few seasons. So the last few weeks for Tolbert, week 6 versus Detroit, 4 catches, 43 yards. Week 8 at San Francisco, 3 catches, 44 yards. And week 9 at the Falcons, 3 catches, 19 yards, a touchdown. So week 10, it's going to be a game where they're going to be trailing most likely early and often versus the Philadelphia Eagles. And they're going to have to pass a whole lot as Dallas. So Tolbert, like I said, he's had 7 or more fantasy points over the last 4 weeks for this Dallas Cowboy team. And if Rush is in there, quarterback, he's got a good rapport with Tolbert, like I said, working on the second team. So he's a receiver there this week. He's available in 77% of fantasy leagues. Next receiver, Ray McCloud of the Atlanta Falcons. So this week, some options on the waiver wire. McCloud, he might step into a bigger role where Drake London left that ball game with a hit pointer versus the Dallas Cowboys in week 9. And McCloud stepped in and he found the end zone. So the last few weeks for McCloud, week 7 versus Seattle, 2 catches, 9 yards. Week 8 at Tampa Bay, a carry, 17 yards, 3 catches, 9 yards, 3 targets. In week 9 versus the Cowboys, like I said, 3 catches, 28 yards, a touchdown, 3 targets, 7 rush yards. So we know he's a speedy receiver. You could use him in some different formations, obviously, as Ray McCloud. And now we'll see how long Drake London possibly could be out. So he's definitely a wide receiver I've looked at off the wire this week. Available right now in 84% of fantasy leagues. Next receiver, Demarcus Robinson of the Los Angeles Rams. So what a ball game it was for Robinson in week 9, where he caught the game-winning touchdown and 2 touchdowns. But the thing is, while he's down on this list, obviously Puka Nacua got ejected throwing a punch early in that ball game at Seattle. So Demarcus Robinson, though, the last 2 weeks, he's definitely emerged as a solid number 3 receiver once again, where he was playing well last season with this Ram team. And he fits in perfect as a slot guy and a number 3 guy, playing behind Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua week 8 versus Minnesota, 2 catches, 35 yards, 2 touchdowns. In week 9 at Seattle, 6 catches, 94 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So like I said, this Ram team, they're playing great football, winning 3 in a row, back to 500. And Matthew Stafford and Demarcus Robinson had the great rapport last season. And now with things opening up and a lot of one-on-one coverage with Kupp and Puka back in the lineup, he's definitely a receiver to add in deeper leagues. Like I said, he had the big game because Puka Nacua was tossed early in that one. He's available, Robinson, in 88% of fantasy leagues. And the final wide receiver I looked at off the wire is Nick Westbrook-Ikhine of the Tennessee Titans. So Ikhine, the last couple weeks, he's had a knack for the end zone as well. And ever since DeAndre Hopkins has been traded away, he's getting more playing time. It looks like the number 2 wide receiver behind Calvin Ridley on this Titan team and playing over Tyler Boyd. Week 7 in Buffalo, 2 catches, 10 yards, a touchdown. Week 8 at Detroit, 2 catches, 39 yards, a touchdown. And week 9 versus the Patriots, 5 catches, 50 yards, and a touchdown. So week 10, definitely a tough matchup versus the Chargers that give up the least amount of fantasy points to wide receivers on the season. But this Titan team, they've been trailing a lot this season, and they're throwing the football a whole lot. And Mason Rudolph, he's got a good rapport with Westbrook-Ikhine, where in preseason, obviously in training camp, and with the second team was Westbrook-Ikhine and Mason Rudolph. So they got a good rapport. Three weeks in a row, he's found the end zone is Westbrook-Ikhine, and right now he's out there in 99% of fantasy leagues. That's a few wide receivers I looked at off the wire for week 10 of the fantasy football season.